Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Welcome to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shana. Thanks for tuning in today. Well, Financial Issues is a partner and listener-supported ministry, and we educate people about financial issues from a biblical worldview. We teach you how to defund darkness, managing your own biblically responsible investment strategy, and we encourage you to be a joyful and generous giver. We call that funding the light. On today's show, we're going to talk about measures of value, and we're going to get to a lot of your questions. And we'll do it right now. Get to the stewardship verse of the day. It comes from Psalm 136:1. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his steadfast love endures forever. Well, have you ever heard of a fair-weathered friend? Maybe you've had one. Someone who is only present when times are going good, but is nowhere to be found in your greatest times of need. But then they show back around when they have a need. Well, God would be very right to call most of us fair-weathered friends, but he could never rightfully be accused of being a fair-weather friend himself. Psalm 136 is a hymn of thanksgiving that emphasizes God's steadfast love and mercy. We are told 26 times in the 26 verses that his love endures forever. In between reminders of how consistent and faithful and lasting that God's love is, we're told how God has expressed his love for us with reference to God's many acts, including creation, the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt, and guidance through the wilderness. We're reminded of God's unwavering support and provision for his people throughout time. We're told 26 times that his love endures forever. That should be enough to lead us into a state of awe that God's love never leaves us, it never forsakes us, and even though our admiration, love, and devotion to God is somewhat fair-weathered, his love never fails. So let the words of this psalm provoke us into a celebration and a worship of his steadfast and faithful, amazing love. Seth, what do you think?
That's well said, Shana. You know, it's appropriate that we look at this verse as we begin this week leading up to Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving in a couple days. And so it's good for us to train our hearts to exhibit a spirit of thankfulness to the Lord. There are many reasons to be thankful to God, but I think this verse highlights some of the very best. Because he is good, because his steadfast love never ends, we need to teach our hearts how to do this well. And so it certainly involves being involved in a Christian community, going to church, being a member of a church. I think also being in the Word and praying. If we can do this well, I think it'll serve us well in the end. Definitely.
I love that. Train our hearts.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
That's a big job.
Absolutely. And it's not an easy thing to do for sure, because our hearts are desperately wicked and deceitful. Yep. But with the sanctification of the Holy Spirit, it can be done. So, Well, Shana, interesting question for our day today. A listener question we got from John in Texas is asking about PE ratios. So he says, what's the best way to look at PE ratios, and are they even relevant anymore? So, Shana, just as a follow-up here, PE, a price to earnings ratio, what is it exactly, and how does it measure a stock's health?
Well, a PE ratio is just by definition a price to earnings ratio. You take the share price of a company and you divide it by its earnings per share. So price per share divided by earnings per share. It gives you a way to more accurately compare, let's say, company A's stock price to company B's stock price. So if all you know about a company is that the price of one of them is $17 and the price of another one is $145, well, if that's all you know, then you're going to think that the $17 stock is cheaper, that it's a better value. But what if you found out that the $17 stock made 74 cents per share on their outstanding stock, and that the $145 stock made almost $3 per share. Am I talking about something real? Yes, I am. And then, so now the rest of the story, as that famous line goes, we tell you that both of those companies, A and B, both make chips. But one of them makes potato chips and has a global market of $16.5 billion, and the other company makes computer chips with a market of $200 billion. So now, which do you think is a better value? So, but PE gives you an opportunity to really compare companies on a basis more relevant than just what is the cost per share, what is the price per share.
Absolutely. And of course, the question has to be asked, which of those is healthier to consume? And if potato chips have seed oils, you just never know. So that's a good question. Anyway,
we'll leave that up to RFK.
That's right. We'll leave that to RFK. Back to the topic at hand, Shana. So PE ratios. In picking financially sound stocks, how effective is examining PE ratios, like John is wondering here?
Yeah, so what he's probably alluding to is that the market has historically high PEs right now. So, that's a lot of times you'll hear people say that the market is overvalued. So they're talking about it in this way, because PE really is how many dollars, how much are you willing to pay for every share of stock for the earnings for that company. So if PE is your only measure of worth for a stock, you're probably not very likely to even own any technology or healthcare stocks. So there's a lot of factors that you have to put PE into perspective in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. And a quick side question here, Shana. So this PE study falls under stock analysis. What type of stock analysis is this?
Oh, this has to do with the fundamentals of a company. Okay. It helps you put into perspective a measure of value for a company.
Yeah. Awesome. And then what would be some other ways that you would encourage John or anyone interested in understanding kind of how to use this to learn more about it?
So I think, I guess to answer his original question, I guess PE is still a relevant topic to consider, but you can't look at it in a vacuum. So you have to put it in context against other sectors. So you have to look at the PE that you're looking at for a specific company. You have to compare it to its peers. You have to compare it to itself from a historical perspective. I mean, let's just say that you have a rule that you're never going to buy anything with a PE of more than 20. And even 20 to some real value investors is a high valuation that they wouldn't even consider. But let's say that your rule is that you're not going to buy a stock with a PE of more than 20. And, you hear about this great chip stock called NVIDIA that is just in the news every single day and, almost single-handedly responsible for some of the run-up that we've seen in a lot of the run-up that we've seen in the markets lately. Well, I can tell you this, if you didn't buy NVIDIA back in 2019 when it was on the buy list at a PE of around 20, you still haven't bought it. So, because the PE has done nothing but go up. And the way that it's looking is, you'll probably never buy NVIDIA. So, if that's your hard, fast rule and you look at that in a vacuum and don't consider anything else, then, you're probably going to miss out on a lot of really great growth stocks. So, you want to look at the PE and how the PE has fluctuated in, let's say, the last 5 years. So, if you look at the company's PE range in the last 5 years and you look at compare it to their current PE, well, then you can see, well, how expensive is it really compared to itself and how it's traded over the last 5 years. And then you also want to, compare it to its peers. If you're looking in the technology space, you're going to be really hard pressed to find many companies that have a PE below 20 at all. So same goes for the healthcare space. You want to also, when you're looking at PEs, compare the trailing PEs to the forward PEs. So if you're looking at the current price right now, price stays consistent, but if a company is expected to make more money in the future, they're going to have a lower forward PE than they do a current PE, and that is typically a good sign.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, Shana. I hope that's helpful for our partner who was asking, who was that? John, who was asking that question? John from Texas. Yeah, I hope that was helpful for you, John. That's good stuff.
So it is. Metrics that we do look at when we're looking at individual stocks. But, there's, like I said, you can't look at it in a vacuum, and you have to look at all the facets of it.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Shana. That's some good wisdom for sure. Wish we had time to get to another question here, but I don't think we do in this segment. Might have to save it for another time.
We'll save it. So, if you're a partner, make sure that you're in the habit every Monday or Tuesday of checking the partner commentary. We typically get that posted. Usually it's late afternoon on Monday, and we get the changes posted to the buy list and give you some things to consider as you're building out your biblically responsible portfolio. Well, I hear the music. That means we're coming up on a break. So we hope that you're going to stick around, because we've got Jason MacDowell coming up next to talk about one of my favorite things, government spending. So stick around. We're going to get to that right after this break.
How is Timothy Plan continuing to lead the fight as you guys now enter your 4th decade of leading this fight of biblically responsible investing?
We've been too silent for too long, and we can no longer be silent. You stand up, like Ronald Reagan said, we're only one generation away from losing all of our liberty. Yeah. It has to be fought for. I wish it didn't. And you can fight for it. You don't need guns and ammunition and that. You can fight for it, especially with your dollars, because it's always about the money. And when the money starts impacting people, they start paying attention. When we launched this, they said it couldn't be done, but here we are 30 years later. They said you couldn't get competitive returns, but here we are.
What a tremendous testament of God's grace.
Go to financialissues.org/Timothy Plans to learn more about Timothy Plan.
God is doing something new, and we can see it in the lives of kids across America. The gospel is going into schools, and we need your help. We are trusting God to raise $200,000 of new funding. This funding will allow us to have 5 additional focus regions, as well as a team member who will oversee all of our regions. Please join us for this Drive for 5 in 2025.
To help spread the love of Jesus to children across the country, go to crossroadskidsclub.com/5 in 2025.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done with your generosity.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shana Burt. Well, we get PCE later this week. Now, PCE is the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation, and we all know that we've struggled greatly with inflation over the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm expecting some rebounds in inflation once the real numbers start to get reported. It will be interesting to see, what comes to light about the revisions that were made on the most recently reported numbers. But I guess we really don't have to worry about that because the Fed is not political, right? They're independent. They operate independent of the government, and they don't have any political motivations at all. Well, I tend to disagree with that. If you've been watching the show for any length of time, you probably know that. I think the last 50 basis point cut that the Fed did was sort of a last-ditch effort to revive a dying Harris campaign, and it didn't work. And Powell and Trump have a strained, at best, relationship. So I said for a long time that the culprit for inflation has been government spending, and the Fed plays a part in that. Well, I've invited my friend and colleague Jason MacDowell back to look into this a little bit deeper. We've uncovered some numbers that we want to bring to light here. So, Jason, let's look at some examples. What can you think of as far as some of the problems with federal and local government spending?
Yeah, I found two problems. We'll work with the federal problem right now. I think it's gone out nationally that the Pentagon has failed its 7th audit. So they're very consistent. They're very consistent. They haven't passed any of their audits since it was mandated. So they have a total of 7 that they haven't passed since being audited. And that entire situation basically was there were certain parts that did pass, very small, but a majority of them couldn't be accounted for because those that were auditing couldn't find any documents to show missing information. So it just kind of was left with, you fail because we can't find anything. So that's essentially where it's at. I mean, that's a very brash definition of what they said. So
only in the federal government can you get away with that kind of stuff.
Right. So part of that is the DoD, which is the largest agency. We'll talk about government spending here and be a little bit more specific with the agency. The DoD, Department of Defense, accounts for $840 billion right now. And so there's a big blow to that agency there. And so that's a big part of what was being audited, is just looking at the agencies. The second largest agency is actually the VA, too, and we'll get into that. The second example is the local government. So I'm going to do a federal and then the local government. Thought this was funny. I saw this briefly and then I wanted to look into it a little bit more. But New York City mayor actually inked a taxpayer-funded contract of $53 million to provide shelter, food, and spending via preloaded debit cards for illegals that they were housing. So this was inked through an actual company in New Jersey, but the point of it was that it started in March of 2024, and in November they had a report of about only I don't know, maybe 2,600 families that were actually covered. So I wanted to break down those numbers a little bit, and I don't go through all of it, but it was families of 1 to 8. So you could have a family of 8. The average debit card that you got, including the housing and everything else that New York City provided, was about $2,200. And for comparison, an average Social Security monthly for an individual for this year average is about $1,920. So $1,900 versus $2,200 for those families. So why wouldn't you claim that you're a family of 8? Because you get the most money. I mean, no one's keeping account of these local governments, so you might as well just make up numbers, right? So total families paid, it was about 2,600. I mean, if I added all this if all of them were 8 people to get the maximum amount, it's about 20,000 people in that case. And so what New York City is now reporting is that there's less illegals that they're housing, which means that I guess logically they're moving them around or they're leaving. Maybe they all didn't get the money. So I wanted to find how much money actually been paid out. So this started in March, and in November, the report is that only 3.4 million of the 53 million was paid out. So more accountability is, where's the other 49 million? I don't know. So that's what was reported still. So I guess some of these illegals weren't getting money or weren't getting the debit cards or the care. So I guess certain ones were they just left. They migrated maybe to another city. I don't know. So keeping track of all this is the problem. Like, there's government spending, but then there's also, I have no idea where to even find the information. And that's where the audits actually fail. So the whole point of this was for New York City to say that we are going to stimulate our local economy, but how do they stimulate it if they're giving out the cards and they're leaving anyways?
Yeah, didn't really work. And if anybody had any doubt in their mind about why so many people were coming into this country, there it is. They're pretty much being paid to come into the country. I mean, we've heard all kinds of stories, and that's just more fuel for the fire, I guess. But, you know, it seems like the markets have really sat poised to hear every word that comes out of the Fed's mouth. And, you know, a lot of times it's market moving. But my argument would be that the Fed maybe didn't cause the inflation, but they sure did enable it, you know, by printing the money that the federal government was spending. You know, Powell in almost every single press conference says, you know, that, oh, well, you know, we don't tell Congress what to do. Congress is the one that decides to spend money. Yeah, that's true. But, you know, the Fed then prints the money that Congress has legislated. So can the Fed even get the inflation horse back in the barn? Now, they've been saying that they're doing a great job of actually getting that to happen, but, you know, so many people don't feel that in their pocketbooks. And, you know, the Fed has two jobs, basically, 2 days, price stability, full employment. So that inflation is a phenomenon that happens, but that it doesn't get too out of control, which it did. And full employment that they want, you know, they consider 5% full employment, I guess, that unemployment is not too high and not too low. So, Jason, what do you think? Does the Fed have what it takes to get the horse back in the barn?
No, in my opinion, the Fed does not have the effective tools. So they may have tools, but are they effective? Not necessarily, especially when the problem, in my opinion, still is government spending. So if they are creating it to satisfy their dual mandate, which is, the price stability and then also to control like employment as far as jobs and keep it balanced, well, they're not being effective because something's going out the door from the government. So when we look at this, reports for this year for inflation seem down. So it looks like the Federal Reserve Jay Powell's looking to address the jobs issue. But that's funny because he's already prepping everyone to say that there may be fewer rate cuts in 2025. So he's just kind of laying the groundwork from that point. So if they're going to change from, hey, we've handled inflation for this year, we're going to move over to jobs. Okay, well then what's the job situation right now?
Jobs are good, right? Harris and Biden, how many victory laps did they take over creating 16 million jobs that were quote unquote created by the Biden administration? Well, if you do the breakdown on that, 13.3 million jobs were created in the first 30 months of the Biden administration, which was mostly people going back to work because guess what? They weren't locked up in their homes anymore and they could actually get back out and go to work. So, the jobs that the Biden administration created were government jobs. And, it used to be that you got paid less to work for the government because you were a public servant. Now you get paid more to work for the government and there's more government jobs. Not sure that that any logic really is actually behind Powell's talk of not cutting as much. I think it's more politically motivated. He knows his time is short.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the solution, Shana?
Yeah, well, the solution to overspending is to either create more revenue, and that means taxes, either raise taxes or raise the base by growing taxable GDP, because if you have more output to tax, you get more taxes and maybe tariffs. But simple math tells me that we have to GDP, which is gross domestic output, growth in the economy, in 1 year, if we're going to even balance our current spending at $7 trillion. We could eliminate spending on illegals, all of that money that you just mentioned that we've been paying people to come illegally into our country just makes no sense. We redirect welfare payments to deportation costs and then eliminate them altogether. That would be one way. Mm-hmm. And then, but what can Trump actually do as president? I've been sort of excited about this DOJ department regarding the 3 million federal employees. 3 million federal employees is what we've got right now. So can Trump actually do anything? Can he deliver his famous line of "you're fired," or can Congress stand in his way?
He has a chance to do the funniest thing, right? Just have a TV show about it. So the Constitution is clear here. So Article 2 of Section 1 gives the executive power into a single person. So we're going to talk about the executive branch of the federal government specifically, and that's going to be the sitting president. So there's two support cases from the Supreme Court from 1926 and 1935 that allow the president to fire anybody in an agency or any political appointment. So that kind of gives us in the Constitution. That doesn't mean that people in our country fight the Constitution. So that's where the courts are going to be a situation here. But the executive branch, when doing research, I found is that 98% of federal employees are actually in the executive branch. I don't have that number, but we work in percentage base. So I think that's a large amount, and it makes sense because think about it. I put my guy in. Now my guy, or whatever the agenda is, can now appropriate how they want because all the bloat is in the executive branch and the president gets swapped out. The other branches just operate probably normally, but all of that bloat's there. So this comes to the DOJ situation, the Department of Government Efficiency, which I wanted to break in. What is this roadmap? Trump can do it from the Constitution, but how is this team going to work? So we got Vivek and we've got Elon, and then hopefully Ron Paul gets involved with this to look at it. So they've made some public statements about what this is going to change over time, obviously, but right now it gives me a good roadmap. The first is I've heard Elon talk about using AI right now to identify the agencies, and that there's so many agencies that the government has, three-letter agencies, that those agencies don't know each other, exist in the same sector. Take healthcare, for example. So they he's going to use AI to look that up, because he's already doing it now, because he's already publicly talked about it. But they're also going to take a legal approach. They're going to have a legal team work with the Office of Management and Budget to help identify those federal employees, but also the money. So it comes about like the money, right? Cutting the budgets themselves. It's not necessarily like a head count, but think about from an executive top-down approaches. If Elon went in and got rid of all of the top execs that had all the bloat in the money, then you can remove one person and then free up more money, not necessarily move heads. So he needs that to be shined on it. So the legal team's going to be there. And then another key point, there's about 7 points they released, but the next one I'm going to basically talk about is Congress has specific spending or authorization that has lapsed. So there's actual money that now has an expiration date that's still receiving money. And a part of that is also a annual federal expenditure of $500 billion plus. That includes
we could probably do we could probably do a whole show about all of this stuff. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll continue it. But folks, if you listen on a station that only carries the 30-minute version of the show, we have to bid you a farewell. If you want to catch the full show, though, go to financialissues.org/live or download the FISM app to watch every live show for free. Make sure to sign up for your newsletter while
in the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
One of the emphases of preborn has been ultrasound in two ways. An ultrasound machine if a pregnancy clinic doesn't have one, and then an ultrasound session, which we underwrite hundreds of thousands of those. We've seen over and over again the dramatic results that when a woman encounters her baby for the first time and hears that heartbeat, she realizes the magnitude of what's happening here, that there is somebody else, that's her baby. So this is why preborn pushes out ultrasound as much as we possibly can. Preborn has seen over 200,000 babies saved, over 59,000 people come to Christ, populating earth and eternity, life for this life and life forever. Save the baby's life, but save the mother's life so that she can lead that baby to Christ. If we're bringing people into this world and the mother doesn't receive Christ and the child is born and the child lives its life and doesn't receive Christ, this is not a good end. And so we have to have the gospel as part and parcel and really the heartbeat of what preborn is.
Kids all across the nation are facing challenges such as isolation and loneliness and bullying, but there's still hope and the love of Jesus, and we want to bring that to those kids.
Today, Crossroads has 6 focus regions across the country. We are committed to adding 5 more regional coordinators, reaching more kids than ever before, but we can't do it without you.
God is doing something new, and we can see it in the lives of kids across America. Children are finding hope and belonging and community and purpose in the love of Jesus. The gospel is going into schools, and we need your help. We are trusting God to raise $200,000 of new funding. This funding will allow us to have 5 additional focus regions, as well as a team member who will oversee all of our regions. Please join us for this Drive for 5 in 2025. Let's place 5 new team members in cities around the nation and watch what God will do.
To help spread the love of Jesus to children across the country, go to crossroadskidsclub.com/5 in 2025.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Hey, Hey, folks, welcome back to Financial Issues. Great to be here with you this Monday, Thanksgiving Monday. Happy early Thanksgiving to all of you. We are live here November the 25th today. Hope you enjoyed that segment there with Shana and Jason. I'll be taking you the rest of the way here along with the Studio A team. Hey, I want to remind you all, please mark your calendars. Bible study will meet on Wednesday of this week. We are not meeting Friday. We're going to meet Wednesday this week for Bible study for the Thanksgiving holiday. So we'll be in Psalm 144 verses 11 through 15. We'll finish Psalm 144 before we start Daniel next week. But Bible study meets Wednesday this week, so make sure to make provisions if you want to join us then. Special guest joining me today right now, folks. We've got Twila, Brase, my dear friend, the president and co-founder of CCH Freedom, back on with me today. Twila, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Yes, it's great to have you. A lot of things have happened.
Yeah, lots of stuff to talk about, Twila. Let's get right to it. I'd love to begin just by getting your thoughts and reactions as well to Trump's historic win for the 2024 presidential election. What does this mean for America?
Well, I think it's a sigh of relief for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Even as the evening went on and numbers kept rolling in, it was like, I think this is going to happen. I think he's going to win. And so, yeah, it's great because otherwise we would have had a Marxist in the president's office and, would not have been good.
Yeah, it might have been. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised had it, and I'm grateful we don't live in a what-if world, but had it gone the other way, that might have been the last election we ever would have had, potentially, last free and fair election. So praising God for that outcome for sure. Twila, let's talk now specifically about some of Trump's cabinet picks thus far and how they might impact the future of the health industry in the United States. I know he's made some controversial moves, some that many have viewed as pretty good moves, actually. What would be your thoughts? How do we make sense of this?
Well, I think that RFK is probably a good pick, although there are other people I might have chosen instead.
Sure.
Like Scott Atlas should be there somewhere. The guy he picked for the COVID task force when he couldn't get past Fauci and Birx and was trying to figure out what he should know. But RFK is probably for the people, but it's like, there's a lot of, at least former Democrats, that he has picked in his for all his cabinet picks. RFK has spoken a lot about health and about the COVID injections and just injections in general for children and others. And I don't think we know a lot about what he would do with the entirety of what HHS deals with, which is Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare. There's so many things, and we really don't have a good idea about where he would go on that. But we do know from the picks of Trump, Trump put Dr. Oz in charge of CMS, which deals with Medicare and Medicaid, but of course it would be under RFK. And we are very unhappy with with the pick of Dr. Oz because he supports Medicare Advantage for all. And as recently as 2020, he wrote about it with an executive of a health plan, a former executive of a health plan, saying this would be the solution to healthcare in America, is that we all have Medicare Advantage for all, and that we pay a 20% payroll tax to fund it. So we are not pleased at all with having Dr. Oz as that pick. We think that Scott Atlas or somebody else would be a much better choice. And then when we look at CDC, now it's Dr. Weldon. I don't know as much about him, but he was a bit of a skeptic about everything that was happening during COVID. And so that may be a good pick. I guess we wait to see. And Dr. Macari, I'm not totally ever sure how to say his last name. For the FDA, he was also a skeptic for what the FDA was doing. So I guess we'll see there too. But some of them seem to have been really, on board in the very beginning of what was happening with COVID. And like the Surgeon General pick, a lot of people unhappy with the Surgeon General pick because she was actually fine with Facebook censoring anybody who was talking, badly about where the narrative was going.
Yeah.
So there are some people that really should not be in those kind of positions of power.
Good to know, Twila. Thank you so much. You had mentioned Dr. Oz and his position on Medicare Advantage. This is something I know we've discussed before on the program, this particular type of this government health provision that we have in this country, Medicare. Could you just remind, maybe we have new listeners who haven't heard you say this before, what are some of the dangers in Medicare Advantage?
Well, I'm going to preface that by just saying that we have a new Medicare guide called the Medicare How-To Guide, which has a small chapter that talks about original Medicare versus Medicare Advantage. And it talks about 10 Medicare traps, and one of them is Medicare Advantage. So I would encourage your listeners to go online to our website and it's for free, and it's unlike any guide you've ever seen before. But Medicare Advantage is the HMO or health plan version of Medicare, and essentially what happens if you pick Medicare Advantage rather than original Medicare with a Medigap policy, then all of the money for Part A and Part B, the federal government gives to the health plan and then allows the health plan to control that money to, according to whatever they think is medically necessary for you. And so this has been a cash cow for these health plans doing Medicare Advantage because they have the right to deny you access to care. They're also getting tons and tons, and I do mean tons, $83 billion more money is going to the Medicare Advantage plans in totality during 2024. And this is what allows them to offer you $0 premiums or silver sneaker gym plans or free dental or free over the counter, because they have all of this money that they're getting because the federal government wants seniors in Medicare Advantage, where these health plans can control the costs, in other words, ration care. And the federal government has shown in 3 reports where they've talked about the rationing of care by Medicare Advantage plans, including the fact that if you appeal, for those people who appeal, 75% of the time, the health plans overturn their denials. But only 1% of people ever appeal. Why? Because they're sick, because they're dying, because they don't have the wherewithal to go through the appeals process. Maybe they don't speak English very well. Maybe it's scary to them. Maybe they're alone. Whatever it is, they don't have. And so it's very lucrative for these Medicare Advantage plans to just deny, deny, deny. And that's what doctors and hospitals say. That's what they do. They just deny, deny, deny. And then they see who has the ability to appeal, who has the time, who has the wherewithal, who has, the ability health-wise to go through this process.
Good to know, Twila. Thank you so much for letting our listeners know that. One quick question for you. On the website, cchfreedom.org, can you remind our listeners, where do they go once they go to that website to get this guide that you just mentioned?
Yes, they can go at the very top. We have this little slider thing that goes around and around, right? Just go through that, and one of them is the Medicare guide. It might even be sitting up there first now. I'm not positive.
Awesome. Yep. I see it right here. Folks in the chat, I'm putting this in there for you if you would like to check it out right now. CCH Freedom's Medicare Guide. Twila, that is great. Thank you so much for letting us know that you guys have that. Getting back to some of the political topics that we've been talking about here, Twila, could you speak to, you actually penned an open letter to President-elect Donald Trump. What was the purpose of this letter, and has there been any response thus far?
So it's an open letter, so not sent directly to him, but sent to the press.
Yeah.
And so the whole purpose of this is that I have always felt, if we have as an organization, we have a very different perspective on health care and health freedom, probably because I'm a nurse, by training. And so I've always thought if I had 15 minutes with Trump, I could change his mind on a variety of things and get him to think differently, because I don't think it's ever been his strong suit. And now we see with some of his picks, I'm concerned with some of his picks. And I think, 15 minutes, and what I told him in this open letter, which we are going to send directly to Mar-a-Lago in very short order here. But what I said is there's a disease infecting healthcare, one disease, and we want to give him 7 suggestions to get rid of that disease. And so it's a bit of a tease, but that's how it is. And so I wanted to get together with him the last time, and we were able to get together with his administration many times. But even if you just look at what happened with COVID, when he brought Scott Atlas on, and Scott Atlas was telling him all these great things, but he still let Fauci and Birx stand up in that podium and counter him. And he just needs to know more about what healthcare really is and the real solutions. And so I've asked for a 15-minute meeting.
Twila, this is part of why we're so grateful for you and the team at CCH Freedom. You guys are really boots on the ground, and we are hoping and praying that you guys are going to be able to get this hearing, if you will, with the president-elect. Twila, that is awesome. You know, it is the spirit of Thanksgiving, the season of Thanksgiving, and Twila, I just want to share with you, from all of us here at FISM, how thankful we are for you and for CCH Freedom, standing in the gap for us and fighting for our health freedoms. So thank you so much from all of us here, Twila. Real quickly, for any new listeners, how can they learn more? How can they support you guys?
They can go to Citizens Council for Health Freedom, cchfreedom.org. They can certainly give us a call if they'd like to. And cchfreedom.org is really the best way. You got everything, every contact information there.
Awesome. Twila, thank you so much. cchfreedom.org, folks. We appreciate Twila and her team so much. We'll be right back after this break. We got more financial issues coming up here. Stick with us.
When we seek to honor God first in everything that we do, then we can trust God that He's going to give us a level of success, whether that means success as we measure them in our earthly portfolios or eternal rewards.
That's why we're here to offer all of you, our listeners, a strategy to help you defund darkness with your investment dollars so that you can fund the light.
This is for people whose eyes have been opened.
Become a partner today by simply going to financialissues.org/join. Click the green button to become a partner today.
Farming lets you see your next generation. I mean, our grandkids are somewhat involved, and my son-in-law and daughter help us. They're deeply involved in farming. We really like the sharing because you get a letter and it says what happened and why the person has a need, and you just feel a connection with them. It was just neat to get all those checks and letter. Everybody sends a letter or a card or something, and it's a different way of doing things, but it's a very good way of doing things.
Every day, kids all across America are coming to school with some kind of hidden pain.
I've seen kids come in who are just so confused about what's right and what's wrong, just having no idea that God loves them. And this just breaks my heart. Crossroads has the opportunity to bring the Word of God right into the public school, to reach children right where they are.
And when we see that happen, we see God changing lives.
We want to see kids not only come to Christ, but pursue a lifelong relationship with Him. And so local churches are uniquely positioned to disciple those children as they become young adults and through their lifespan.
Crossroads comes alongside a church and provides that church with a club structure, curriculum, training, and ongoing coaching for them to run these outreaches in public schools.
If you are burdened for the children of America, consider making a donation to Crossroads Kids Club. For more information, visit Reach Our Schools.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Folks, it's always fun to have Twila on. I appreciate her joining us today. She had mentioned that open letter that she had sent a couple weeks ago and is now forwarding to Mar-a-Lago. I just put a copy of that on CCH Freedom's website in the chat if you want to read that. It's really good. So yeah, really exciting stuff there that hopefully Twila and her team can get a hearing with President-elect Trump. It would be pretty awesome. So always appreciate the work that they do. CCHfreedom.org, folks, if you want to learn more. Well, the markets, let's turn to those now. Last week, major indices all turned positive once again after another interesting week, to say the least. Sam, we've had a couple interesting weeks in the markets, haven't we?
Yeah, back to back. Interesting. But those are the issues in the financial part, right?
That's exactly right. There was only a presidential election and some other things. I think NVIDIA reported
potential World War III. I feel like every week we have potential World War III. So I don't know how much stake I put in that.
Yeah, so no big deal, folks. But at any rate, by mid-afternoon, all three major indices in positive territory. By late afternoon, same deal. By Friday's closing bell, all of them finished positive. The Dow was up about a full percentage point. The S&P was up 0.33%, and the NASDAQ slightly up around 0.1% or so. For the week, the Dow Jones jumped 2% and posted a record close on Friday, so it'll be opening from record territory here. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ each rose almost 2%, about 1.7%. The pre-markets this morning were looking pretty good, and as they sit right now, give me one moment as I check them, all in positive territory. Looking good so far out the gate for a short week here, the last week of the month of November. The Dow Jones is up a full percentage point, more than actually. The S&P 500 is up 0.75%, and the NASDAQ is up almost a full percentage point as well, right around 4/5. So market's looking to open hot this week. Oil, as it sits right now, is down a little bit, right around $70 a barrel, a little above $70 a barrel. The U.S. 10-year Treasury yields creeping downward as well, around 4.3%. So that's what the markets are looking like. What to expect this week, folks? As I said, short trading week this week. Not much today. Tomorrow we get consumer confidence, and then Wednesday we get the jobless claims numbers. Those will come actually a day early. We also get the GDP numbers and the PCE index, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. That's probably really the big number that we'll get this week. Nothing on Thursday for the holiday, and then Friday just PMI. So a bit of a shortened week here that we have in the markets. I did mention in the last segment, if you want to join Bible study, folks, please make provisions to join on Wednesday. We're not meeting on Friday. We're meeting on Wednesday of this week for Bible study. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. All right, Sam, we got some interesting headlines here in the BRI space. Biblically responsible investing is what we're all about. And so Sam is going to give us a little bit of a rundown of what's happening here. What do we got?
That's right, Seth. Well, if you've been following the last couple of weeks, on Mondays, we're kind of making this our BRI segment where we like to highlight some companies that are doing some not so great things so that you can really understand what BRI is all about. Why don't you want companies to be using their money in this way? Why don't you want to be investing in those companies? So I think the best example last week, you probably heard about this if you've been paying any attention to the news, especially in right-wing circles. That would be luxury sports car Jaguar released this brand new, really woke ad. You can see a little bit of it on the screen right now, being labeled as Bud Light 2.0, because what it features is it doesn't feature any cars at all, but instead it shows androgynous models. I really can't tell if any of them are men or women or what they are. Seth, they remind me of the, if you ever seen the Hunger Games, the people in the Capitol, how they look really weird and decadent.
They almost look fake.
Pretty much what they look like right there. So no cars at all, just a bunch of this woke nonsense and woke taglines like, what do we have here? Live vivid, delete ordinary, and break molds. Very, very fancy, very pressing forward here with this. But as you can imagine, this has received quite a bit of backlash, and it's also raised some questions of how on earth did this happen? Well, the company's own brand, what do we have here? He's the brand manager. He kind of explained this last month, explaining the new direction the company is going towards. We do have that clip right here, and hopefully this explains why on earth is Jaguar going in this very strange and kind of disturbing direction.
And we're on a transformative journey of our own, driven by a belief in diversity, inclusion, creativity, policy, and most importantly, action. We've established over 15 DEI groups, such as Pride, who are here tonight in the back. Thank you guys for coming. Women in Engineering and Neurodiversity Matters. We've launched major policy revisions, such as transitioning at work, to drive equity and support for our communities, embracing individuality as our superpower.
Notice what he didn't mention there, Seth. Can you pick it up?
Was it cars?
Wasn't cars. No. I love he says, and most importantly, I'm like, he's going to say it. He's going to say the word. And then he says action. I'm like, oh, you were so close, man. You were this close to saying that.
Sam, honestly, it's not surprising a car company not mentioning cars once.
It's so weird.
Ad.
I think Elon Musk even asked that. He said, aren't you a car company? And they're like, yes, actually we are. Really, you don't seem like it. And they're calling this a Bud Light 2.0, but even Bud Light, after they did their thing with Dylan Mulvaney, they at least had the sense to realize, we're receiving some backlash to this, but not so with Jaguar. They told Fox Business that this is part of a bold and imaginative reinvention for the company. And on top of that, they say they look forward to sharing more on Jaguar's transformation in the coming days and weeks. So that's very exciting, I suppose, Seth. So I want to ask, I kid. It is very weird.
Sam, honestly, it's tough because we don't mean to poke fun at this stuff, folks, but sometimes it's so ridiculous that what else can you do except laugh?
I mean, you're a car company.
You're a car company
I was talking to Grant. It reminds me of those weird. You ever see like a perfume commercial where you don't know halfway through what on earth that it's selling, and at the end it's like, oh, it's perfume. So I don't know if that's the direction they're going. They're going from cars to perfume. But I want to ask you an important question about this, Seth, because it strikes me that this is more of an ideological thing for them than a business model. Is this woke LGBT stuff really seems to be taking over Jaguar? Do you think the company's too far gone, basically? Because clearly, like I said, they've not mentioned cars at all in any of these promotions that they're doing. So is this a sign that the company has been ideologically taken over, it's ideologically corrupt in some way, and maybe be immune to market influences? Because clearly they just don't care.
Sam, it's an interesting question. It really is. I do think this won't bode well for them. I mean, I do think what we've seen in the last year and a half or so with really, and this ministry has been a huge part of it, this BRI movement. The outside world won't call it BRI. I think they'll call it more a move away from wokeism. And they're not synonymous, by the way, but it's many of the same crossovers. I don't think this will bode well for Jaguar. But Sam, to get to your question, I always believe that people can change. I really do. I mean, as long as we have breath in our bodies, you think about the criminal on the cross, spent what we presume his whole life as a criminal. And then at the end, he saw the Lord Jesus and he cried out to him in his final moments. And Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. And I believe that man's in glory right now with Jesus. It's a little bit different because it's a personal testimony of salvation versus a company moving away from nonsense like this. But I do believe that can happen. I don't think I could go as far as to say that any company is too far gone to change. That said, something like this, there's going to have to be some serious gut jobbing that's going to happen to get change like this happening. I mean, in order for Jaguar to turn around from this, Sam, they probably would need like their own version of Doge. They would need like an Elon Musk coming in and just firing 90% of the people. It's possible. Absolutely. I mean, we have seen that. We have seen companies turn around. We'd love to see this here as well. I think it's a tall order, though, and there's going to have to be a lot of change that happens, Sam. So to answer your question, yes, but it would take a whole lot of work. Yeah,
and it is concerning that they're just appearing to double down at the moment. I do want to mention this also comes on the heels of another company that appears to be doing that. That would be Walgreens and their sister company, Boots. They just released a new ad last week. Really took a hit in the stock market after releasing this. You're seeing this also on the screen right now. What it shows is, I believe it's Mrs. Claus prepping for Christmas with Boots products, but it's full of very strange looking elves. I believe that some of them are actually men in drag or maybe even transgender. It's not really clear.
Again, really androgynous.
Yeah. Again, I don't know it's really creepy, this androgynous stuff. And then on top of that, you can't hear it because I'm just playing the video right now. You can't actually hear it. It doesn't make for the best audio. But Mrs. Claus in there refers to a kid or someone receiving a gift as like a they, them. He says, oh, that will look great on them, and then refers to someone else as she. So clearly it's going into this LGBT gender stuff too. So again, not a great ad. Yet another one of these companies that appears to be taken over by this. And thankfully with them, it appears the market is responding in some way. I saw Jaguar took a hit as well, but it does look like they might be recovering on that. I haven't checked this morning, but it did look like it was trending upward again.
Absolutely. Folks, some encouragement for you, as we see this here. I think we are seeing a cultural shift here. I really do. And so the good news is money talks. And, Sam, to get back to your question earlier about Jaguar, I think it applies to Walgreens as well. If nothing else, they might not have a change of heart. But when they see those dollar signs start to go down, and when they see that money start to not come in as much, and they get the Bud Light treatment or the Target treatment, I think that is what is going to make them change. Absolutely. Because listen, you can get involved in whatever kind of ridiculous any kind of like ideology that you want to, but at the end of the day, if it's not making money for your business, it's not going to let you stay in business. You have to eventually do something that's going to make money to please your consumer. And so I do think, Sam, we are seeing a cultural shift here, and that's good news, folks. Man, that's really good news because you all are such a part of this. These petitions that we put out, we don't just do those for fun. We actually do those because we believe they make a difference, and they really do. They really, really do. So what you all are doing in fighting for the truth in what is right in the BRI space. Believe me, it's working. We're going to continue to see it work, and I really do believe that. Sam, thank you for bringing those up to us. It's interesting, crazy stuff. None, the Lord is on the throne, as we always remember at the end of every show, and everything you have belongs to him. So let's be found good and faithful stewards with it. God bless you all. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow for more financial issues.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.